Good afternoon. Welcome in everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. We've got more news, not coming, but going, and this helps explain where things stand with Arkansas's roster retention efforts. It helps tell the story. We're not all the way there yet, but things become more clear likely as we now move into Tuesday, the first day after the official end of the college basketball season. Thiero, the junior 3-4 combo forward, has declared for the NBA draft. He did that this afternoon via his Instagram page. If you go back to Friday, April 4th, so here we are, April 8th, 5 days later, Friday was when Boogie Fland declared for the draft. So you've got two players that for the longest time were always expected to declare for the draft. Boogie Fland was a guy that was the most likely, and Thiero now has done the same, and he was a guy that Arkansas made a real push to try to keep Thiero in the fold, an NIL push. When I was on yesterday, I went through percentages on everybody that was still out there. We knew Flam was off the board as of yesterday, Thiero not, and he was a guy that I said I was leaning the fact that he'd probably go to the draft. I said I was close to 50-50 on it just because he had a handsome NIL offer to stay, to be retained. But I gave it a 51-49 split that he'd leave. Obviously, it was a greater percentage than that because it didn't even take 24 hours for the announcement to come out. So this gives us another idea now. With Fland and Thiero gone to the draft, you had Big Z into the portal off to Illinois, and you had Jonas Adu and Nelly Davis off the board because their eligibility's out. So that's 5 of your top 9 rotation. Simple math. Subtract 5 from 9, that leaves 4. You could still retain 4. The most likely candidates, as I described last night with percentages, when I gave that's how I gave my odds on who's coming back, were Carter Knox, Billy Richmond III, and Trevor Brazil. The fourth piece to the puzzle is DJ Wagner. I said it regarding DJ that I was about the same percentage, 51-49, that DJ will get in the portal, that he'll move on. There's why he might stay, and there's good reasons why he might depart. But I think the biggest news here, what did I talk about also last night? I mentioned the 3 guys that I thought improved the most as Arkansas season went to the back stretch. And it was Trevor Brazil, Carter Knox, and Billy Richmond. I really thought those were the 3. And so there are people who are going to say, well, losing Thiero really hurts your retention. Well, of course it does. He was your best player before he got hurt late in the year. But let's not forget, Arkansas finished out the Missouri game that became close with him off the floor. The last 6 minutes got to a 2-possession game, 2 or 3 possession game. I think 6 or 7 points. And Arkansas closed that game out. They played their next 4 regular season games, picking up must wins to get to the NCAA tournament, to lock up an at-large bid without Thiero. And of course, Boogie Fland had missed 15 games, when you counted when he left at the 0-5 start through the end of the regular season. So you were winning games, and in some ways, down to 7 in your rotation, guys stepped up and showed really well. So I'm not trying to sell you on the idea, but you went through the SEC tournament without both Fland and Thiero, and you won your first round game. You lost to Ole Miss in the second round. You had Fland back for a much different role, a smaller role, and a different role in the first 2 NCAA tournament wins, and he helped you there. But he was not a big producer. He was a help. Thiero wasn't back. Thiero played 5 minutes in the Sweet 16 game against Texas Tech, where Arkansas was on the cusp of punching its ticket to the Elite Eight and just handed the game over. So the point here is the guys that you're still trying to retain, at least 3 of those had the most improvement when they were put in a spot with your top 2 players, top 2 leading scorers, your leading rebounder, your leader in assist, were no longer available. DJ Wagner's another guy that stepped up. We'll see what happens with him. We'll see if he announces that he's staying or if it ends up being that he gets in the portal. Like I said, I'm close to 50-50 on that. I lean just slightly that maybe he gets in the portal. That could change. My opinion could change on that any minute. But I think beyond the group of players that got better and helped you, who is the one guy that benefited the most with Thiero out of the picture? It was Trevor Brazil. And again, I went through the stats last night when I talked about what he did in those last 9 or 10 games. 11 plus points, between 9 and 10 rebounds per game. in that 9 or 10 game stretch. He had 6 games where he was hitting 3-point shots, multiple. He had 3 games where he had at least 3 made threes in games. He was still blocking shots. He was going after every rebound with a vengeance. If you look at that version of him, it is a better rebounder than Adu Thiero. It is certainly a better floor spacer than Adu Thiero. He's not going to play bully ball like Adu Thiero did. And for a team that had challenges with physicality, that is something that it remains a challenge as you try to construct this second roster. It's more of a challenge with Thiero out, right? But I think in a lot of ways, you look at this and say, this is a big opportunity to retain Trevor Brazil. Some of the reporting I've given everybody was that Arkansas, the initial offer I heard to retain him was low. That's common around the country. We saw a lot of guys go in the portal. Some of them have peeled back and gone back because schools determined, we got to keep this guy. And we've heard nothing publicly on this about Brazil. We've not seen his name enter the portal. It's a very strong indicator, perhaps, that Arkansas's coming correct the second time around on that. Doesn't want to lose out on that. Remember, the offer I reported you guys that I heard was low for Morez Johnson. He went off to Michigan. We're hearing, and we'll just repeat it, guys like Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle are one or both, maybe silent commits to Arkansas. It's just a matter of time when that becomes public. Well, that's 2 big men. And if you get Trevor and Brazil back, it's not like you lost. We always made the point you want to retain Thiero and Brazil because you could find a way to make that good for you. But in reality, you didn't have both of those guys thriving together. You never had that. And they played basically that 4 spot. Now, Brazil can also help at the 5, but I don't remember any games. I mean, we can go back to the Michigan win when both Jonas Adu and Trevor and Brazil played really well in that game. That was their best non-conference game against a team that had a pulse. And if you remember, Thiero did some good stuff in that game, but he was sick. They limited his minutes, if I remember correctly, against Michigan. So that wasn't even a game where, once you got into SEC play, Brazil wasn't doing much. Jonas Adu was still dealing with an injury, and Thiero was your top guy. Thiero was the hero when you were 0-5 and you got picked up that last-minute win against Georgia. But it wasn't until Brazil got a wide berth at that position where he started to succeed and excel. So more than one thing can be true at once. It's not that this is necessarily a good thing overall when you're trying to keep retention. You're trying to get a guy that's been with Calipari for 3 years to make it 4 when he was your leading scorer and rebounder when he was available. And certainly once Flan was out, Thiero would not only help win that Georgia game, he helped win other games that helped Arkansas get to the NCAA tournament. So but because he got out much later when his injury came on. So it's not like this is all good. But there are some good aspects of it when you look at it in reality of what we saw play out. It's fair to say that if you're keeping Brazil, you're losing some qualities that Thiero brought that Brazil doesn't, but you're gaining qualities that if Brazil's getting increased minutes at that position at the 4, like he did at the end of the year with no Thiero, potentially he can just pick up where he left off. And he's not looking for shoulder, and you don't have an awkward trying to figure out how to make that work, especially if you're bringing in 2 other 5s. Brazil's going to be, this is interesting. I'm curious to see, because I think Brazil's going to be able to help Arkansas at the 5 in certain lineups. If you've got, and that means I'm thinking that Ewan, and if it's Ewan and Pringle, let's just say it is for now, and then being able to complement those guys. Brazil really complimented Jonas Adu once they got going. They were good together on the court at the same time. I would argue that their tandem together at the same time was better than any front court tandem Arkansas had at the same time. Part of that was, it's no knock against Thiero, but by the time Jonas Adu started getting things clicking, it wasn't much longer till Thiero was done. So that's part of it, was just timing. But I thought so, and we don't know with the guys that step in, will there still be that kind of chemistry there? Maybe there will be, but this now makes Trevor and Brazil an even bigger retention need. And if it was at a point where you stepped not as strong as you could with NIL, like I heard on him, you've got more NIL money, because what have we also been reporting? I've been telling you that what I gather is The two biggest names that I hear in terms of the biggest dollar amounts in retention were Thiero and Nate Ament. Well, that's another part of this equation. Nate Ament. He's a guy. If Brazil and Thiero have their differences, I think Nate Ament and Thiero have even more differences because one guy's strong, can play bully ball. The other guy's a highly skilled guy that's even taller than Thiero still is, was as a Razorback, still will be. He's still got his height that he takes with him to the NBA draft. That sounded awkward. But it's a much different player. Arkansas's put a lot. I'm telling you, I've gotten the numbers in Jackson to St. John's. Is that already a thing? Did that happen yesterday when I was on? I was going to get to talking about him when I was on yesterday. Duke Miles to Virginia. That actually came. That commitment announcement went out on social media 15 or 20 minutes after I'd started this, and I don't have an extra monitor or anything here. I just look at my handwritten notes when I have them. I don't have any today, and I'm looking at you guys, whoever's looking back at me. And thanks for being here, by the way. HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Subscribe, like, share, turn the notifications on so that you can, because I'm breaking in a lot more now. I need to start saying that if you haven't done that. So if someone has seen, J.J. Andrews commit decision May 15th. We talked about that. Acquaintance to Kentucky. That happened really fast. Things went really fast on his situation. And Kentucky, it was not bashful at all. Any opportunity that Kentucky can win of a player that John Calipari might have interest in or that committed to him, or, there's some, notion that maybe Arkansas will be in the mix, Kentucky will move fast. I talked to one of the Kentucky beat writers earlier today, and they're a little surprised by some of the moves. Not that they're not really good players, because they are. But it was the sense of everything they were hearing about the Wildcats NIL. They're going to have to figure out ways to come through on some stuff, and they're moving pretty fast. Well, great. Good for them. Okay, someone's just on here saying, I understand that stuff happens. That's why I asked, because, again, when I was on yesterday, literally Duke Miles committed to Virginia. When I was talking about him as one of those guys that would fit a perimeter player that's a really good three-point shooter and brings other qualities that could be useful, especially if DJ Wagner goes in the portal. So let's look at it then. So a guy like Nate Ament, I think he's still a top priority, obviously. I've seen the NIL figure. I think Arkansas's right there. It may be Duke. Maybe it's Louisville. I can't give you a definite on that. I've heard different things on it. I've heard from multiple people that think Arkansas's got a real shot at finishing this out. And I said it the last time I was on yesterday. John Calipari thinks he's going to get this player. I'm looking at the portal moves and letting guys go elsewhere and not making certain guys that arguably help you at that 3-4 position and give you extra depth. There are going to be people that argue, well, when you look at the lack of strength, even though he's 6'9", pushing 6'10", Nate Ament is only a wing. That's going to be true at the NBA level. And it will sometimes be not only a wing, but sometimes he will play just, at the 3 with two other frontline guys on the court with him. But you can have versatility, you playing with other wings on the court with him when you play smaller lineup. That's why I refer to guys as small ball 3-4s. Some guys are just tweeners. And the big difference between a guy like Thiero, who's gone to the NBA draft now as a 3-4 tweener, is that he really is more of the 4 in the college game. He'll be probably strictly a 3 and maybe a small ball 4 at the pro level. Nate Ament at the pro level is going to be more of a 3. And as he gets stronger and bigger, maybe see the floor as a small ball 4, probably a lot less of that. But in college, they're just two different quantities that can be that other, Thiero not a traditional 4, but he's not skilled enough to really be a wing. But you could get by with him as a slasher with two other bigs on the floor. Arkansas ran some of that. With Nate Ament, it'll be a little bit different. He might be on the court with guys like a Carter Knox or Billy Richmond, and you've gone 2 wings, 2 guards, and 1 big. You can get away with that for stretches of the game. It doesn't mean you have to match up that way for the majority of the game. But because he's 6'9", pushing 6'10", and because he can stretch the floor, he can take bigger guys that he might have trouble defending on one end and put them in a matchup problem on the other because of his skill, because of his ability to shoot. So there's more than one way to look at it. So the idea that a guy like Trevor Brazil, it opens the door for him to flourish potentially in the kind of role he had to have by default once Thiero went out. Does anybody think that if Thiero was coming back, he wasn't going to get a mother load of minutes and he's locked into that kind of a role, and that changes what maybe Brazil could bring to the table for you. And again, I say Nate Amin, if you get him, you've got a difference maker who, again, doesn't bring the same physical qualities as a Thiero. He brings you a lot more skill, but he also gives you a look at that small ball four spot in a different way, but in ways that will have positives and negatives, just like Thiero did. Thiero had positives and negatives at that spot. We're going to remember him mostly positively because he led the team in scoring, 6 rebounds a game. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that led the team. He was averaging 1.8 steals per game when he got hurt. That led the team, 1.7, 1.8, something like that. When you looked at how many field goal attempts he got, he was the team's leader qualifier in field goal percentage. He drew more free throws than anybody. I mean, Arkansas's going to have to figure out other ways and other combinations to get some of the stuff done that Adu Thiero brought to the table. So, yes, part of it is you're losing a lot there. But this was pretty much always expected until we thought Arkansas had a shot at maybe keeping him. We need a great shooting guard. I keep saying that. We're going to talk guards here in a little bit. Once again, thank you for joining me on here. Adu Thiero, the news is off to the NBA draft. He posted it to Instagram. I was in the car when that happened and had to get home and get to a chance to where I had a story ready to go. And so I got that article out on HogvilleNET. Once I get off of here, I'm going to migrate it over to KNWA Pig Trail Nation. I'm going to put this Zoom in there with it since we're talking about that stuff. But good for Adu Thiero. Remember, I had an NBA scout tell me not long ago that he saw Thiero as a 40 to 60 guy. Well, Jonathan Wasserman, who's been a long time, he's the lead NBA draft scout for Bleacher Report. He does a really good job. He's one of the better ones out there. I use his stuff all the time. He had an update today, both rounds, first and second round, and he had Adu Thiero going at number 39. So the back end of that early second round, one spot away from what my NBA scout told me. What was it? Just a few days ago, weekend before last, and I reported it on these segments and tweeted it out. So that's about what in the Thiero theory is. That's probably about right. You also have to think that even though maybe there's maybe there's some feedback they're getting that's not all the formal feedback, which they'll go through that process. Every player does once they declare for the draft. They get feedback from every team. They might or may not get invited to an NBA draft combine. We're going to learn soon enough about those things. We'll go out and we'll learn about it. Individual teams that want to bring them in for workouts, all that stuff. But they may already start getting feedback because sometimes deals are worked under the table to get guys to go in the draft. Just like we know when some guys get in the transfer portal, they already know what team they want to go to. All this stuff's getting worked out on the back end. You've got agent reps now for college players because they were getting NIL. I mean, so look, you get the picture. So some of this stuff is happening. We're finding out about it later. It's not necessarily real time. That's all. I always throw that disclaimer. When I bring intel and I get good source information, sometimes it's real time and sometimes it's not. And when I'm not real sure about it, like the Quainton stuff, Arkansas was going to do more than kick the tires. They didn't have a chance to do more than kick the tires. And I think part of that was Arkansas was moving on Nick Pringle about the time they realized what the NIL ask was going to be for Quaintons. I think that plus the uncertainty was enough for them not even to make direct contact with the player. They got some. That's the last I heard on that. The Lamar Wilkerson thing. I've talked about it twice now. The last 2 days when it came, I tweeted out there's a lot of smoke with Wilkerson and it to Indiana. And on that tweet, I said, we'll see what happens or something like that. The first time I talked about it on here a couple of days ago, I believe it was Sunday maybe, I said that, there's a lot of stuff stirring there. Maybe it's true, but I haven't been able to confirm that that's in fact going to happen. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, what it looks like if maybe Arkansas's going to ride mostly with Malik Thomas as your 2 and not bring in a high caliber guy. What does that look like? Here are some other names of guys that didn't average 20 points and take 8 threes a game, but were good 3-point shooters. We talked Duke Miles. Ian Jackson just hit the portal out of North Carolina. Wesley Yates III out of USC. So we went through some of those names. But now I'm hearing, I've got another source because I checked on this regarding Lamar Wilkerson. I'm like, is this really a done deal? And this is someone from the NBA side of things, but that gets really good information, very connected, and says it might be getting close to that. But they don't have a confirmation either that that's just going to be announced at any time. Now it could be on that, but I do have some intel on visits. I put that in the headline or whatever, the subject line for this podcast or whatever you call it, HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Is that Arkansas? This is coming from someone that would know. I'll put it that way. Arkansas could have as many as 4 visitors, in the next couple of weeks. That's the information. I wasn't told who. To me, if guys like Ewan and Pringle are both silent commits, they've got to be 2 of those. I've mentioned multiple times on here, Arkansas, there was a chance Arkansas's already done a visit with someone under the color of night, cloaked away, just like they did with Nellie Davis. I'm bringing it up again because when I talked about that, the one guy I said with Ewan was less likely, remember, because the dead period that we're in now that ends on Thursday in a couple of days started last Thursday, April 3rd. And I think he entered the portal like 48 hours before that officially. And so that would have had to have been a quick something. It could have happened maybe, but Nick Pringle's name has been out there since day one when the portal opened the week before. It's more likely that he's somebody that could have visited already. So I don't know, if one or if there's going to be up as many as 4 upcoming visits, potentially. That's how it was said, up to, so it's not a locked in that there will be 4. As many as up to 4 visitors over the next couple of weeks. So you know how things change. If something gets figured out, maybe you don't have that many. Maybe you need to bring more other people going to the portal. I mean, that's going to be fluid, right? Everything is right now. There's stuff happening, guys jumping in the portal that are different. And sometimes it's not just about one guy you're recruiting. It's about somebody else becoming available or something else at another position that you're after changed. And it actually impacts another guy that you thought in tandem something would work. But now you need to get a different. So there's all kinds of stuff that plays into why. But I'm told as many as 4 visitors over the next couple of weeks or so. Maybe that goes longer than the time frame, or maybe it's fewer players. Again, we'll make adjustments on the reporting if I get more information and see a little more clearly about what's left. Some of the natural questions are, well, who's the replacement for Thiero? I spent most of this segment already talking about it. I think it's Brazil with a bigger role, which he showed he could handle. He's got to be consistent. He needs to stay healthy. Arkansas is expanding the roster. Maybe you double up and get another guy that can play a bully ball kind of game. Muhammad Diabate, who's off to Kentucky as well, same as Quaintance, that happened really fast. He was a guy I would identify as someone that would be a good replacement there. But there's more than one way to do it. Again, Nate Ament. Arkansas's pushed the chips to the middle of the table for a guy like that. Lamar Wilkerson, I said the 4 visits. What did he tell me? When I talked to him, he said, I'm going to take official visits after the Final 4. Well, you still have a dead period for 2 more days. So potentially this weekend, he starts taking visits. That's part of the other thing with the NBA guy I talked to that's familiar with his situation, telling me that he hasn't heard for certain that that's locked down with Indiana. And that he also heard visits plural, not one. I think Indiana's part of that mix. And that may be reported somewhere. And I don't know if it's reported anywhere that Arkansas is getting a visit with him. I don't have that anything like that set in stone. Only that when I talked to him and I told you guys there was stuff I couldn't share, me not to, but I got the impression beyond the source information I had that Arkansas up to that point, and I said it was always going to be an NIL thing, and then what you could guarantee or deliver on roll and potential for production was that NIL being equal, Arkansas might be in the driver's seat. Well, if he's not locked down to a commitment right now to Indiana, he's going to take visits. And based on our conversations, I got to think Arkansas's got a real shot. I got to think Arkansas's got a real shot to potentially get him on campus for a visit. I don't think Adu Thiero news to the NBA draft has anything to do with that, other than more NIL money maybe based on Because if I was hearing numbers correctly for Thiero and for Ament, what I never knew was, is that an either or where they would give Thiero this much? They're trying to keep him. They're not sure about Ament. Or is that in tandem? We want to get both, and this is the amount, because I think they would get both if they could, but were they willing to, whatever they're offering Thiero and whatever they're offering Ament, make sure that happens and skimp somewhere else? That's the part I don't know. But the point is, positionally, this has nothing to do with Lamar Wilkerson or other guard shooters, but NIL resources now being available to you might be willing. So those are all things in play. And maybe that's partly why guys were waiting to see what's going on. That's why Mint's checking out portal moves. That's why a guy like Wilkerson may still want to take visits. We'll see if he does. We talked yesterday about Ian Jackson going to the portal. I mentioned the fact that you knew this already if you're following this stuff, but Arkansas was one of the 5 finalists. It wasn't even this time last year. You remember, class of 2024, he made his decision mid-season as a high school junior. He took his Arkansas visit in January during the middle of the basketball season. It was one of the SEC games that he came in for. I'm trying to remember which SEC game it was. I think I know this. So that was in 2023, January, 22-23 season, 23-24. I think that would have been a year that Arkansas hosted Bama. And I believe that's the game that Brandon Miller, I think he was there the night Brandon Miller went off. So I think that's right. I'm not 100% sure. But either way, he's been on campus. It was Arkansas, LSU, Oregon, Kentucky, and North Carolina. So he ends up committing to North Carolina, I think, a week or so after his visit. So he got it done and over with. But the point is, Calipari was all over him, and there was thought to be a 2-team race really at the end of it between Kentucky and North Carolina. That was one where old EPM made sure I knew on the back end, no, probably not going to get him, but, we're going to get him on campus for a visit. So, you knew it was kind of coming, that it wouldn't be Arkansas. But at the same time, you do everything you can to get a guy like that. So he's already been on campus. I think there's a way to do this where I can get the nice shirt. I have the exact one. Yeah, this one, some of these shirts I wear don't have pockets. Some of them do. This has got a breast pocket, whatever. Glad you have the same shirt. But yeah, so, you're talking Ian Jackson, 6'4". I went through his stats. 11.9 points per game, 2.7 rebounds. I've got it memorized. 60 of 152 from 3. That's good volume. 39.5% there. Shot over 73% at the free throw line. You'd like to see your guards shoot a little bit better than that. But maybe Calipari. I mean, I tweeted this out earlier. I'm told there's mutual interest. St. John's, some think it's a lock there. I saw someone put that on here. Ole Miss has been mentioned with it. I saw some stuff on social media, Michigan State, maybe some others. We'll see if something goes really fast on that. I was just told that there's mutual interest there. And again, that's the problem sometimes with source information. I don't know how real time that is. I don't know if someone heard that 3 days ago. I always ask, is that recent? How recently did you hear it? But sometimes I don't always get a straight answer on that. So I always wonder, well, if that's 3 days old, that in this day and age, with how this moves quickly in the portal, that can be really old news. So I'm not 100% sure, other than, I was told, there's mutual interest in there as he was getting ready to go into the portal. Well, we'll see how much interest there really is. This is another situation. You're talking about a 2024 McDonald's All-American, a guy that's would be then, if you could get him in that backcourt with guys like Malik Thomas at the 2, that's where you're looking at a guy like that. But he does bring that notion of a guy that's already got some college experience. He checks that box. He had a stretch of games, I think December and January. We had a bunch of 20-point games and was really productive. Toward the end of the year, as it was closing out, that team felt somehow Carolina got invited to the NCAA tournament, I guess, just because their AD was the chairman of the selection committee and he was going to get a raise. He gets a bump. I think it was reported he got a $100,000 bump if Carolina made the tournament. Well, he said he wasn't in the room for that selection, but I digress. The point is that this is a guy that helped a tournament team, but at the end of the year, his role was very much diminished. So maybe that's partly why he's in the portal. And maybe there's something there with Arkansas. I've said over and over again, yeah, you may have a logjam in your backcourt. You had to get bigs. You may have a logjam in your backcourt, but you got to do something about shooting somewhere. You know, if Brazil's getting more minutes now, and Thiero's out of the picture, who can't shoot threes, and we saw Brazil really turn that on as part of what he was giving Arkansas. I mean, the rebounding and the stretch the floor part of that on offense were really, really good. That might be part of your solution on the front line. I mean, he was shooting the ball. He was getting a lot more playing time than Big Z at the end of the year. He ended up shooting a similar percentage when you look at it in totality, 36% on the season for Brazil from three. He wasn't putting up the kind of volume that Z did early on, but Z's role was out. Brazil was getting all the minutes, and at the end of the year, he's at 39% on 2 attempts per game. Imagine him consistently 30-plus games getting those kind of minutes. Again, if he can stay healthy and continue to keep the motor on, be consistent. If he does that and they feel like that's coming and it's going to continue, then that helps with your three-point shooting from the front line. It helps explain why, well, maybe it's okay that neither you or Pringle will help you there. You don't have a lot of rim protection with those guys. We've talked about that. Well, Brazil can maybe help you there. Nate Ament, if you get him, is going to definitely help you in your three-point shooting. 40+% at every platform pre-college. Hit both of his threes in the McDonald's All-American game. You'll get a chance to put eyes on him again this Saturday. He and Darius Acuff Jr., Team Nike, the Nike Hoop Summit, Team USA versus the world team. You always have to take stats and performances in these kind of games, with a grain of salt, and you understand that it's not, and it may not translate even to the next level, but we can still parse some things out. So far, he continues to show he's a sniper when he takes threes. But in the backcourt, a guy like Ian Jackson helps you there. Wesley Yates III, that's another guy that Kentucky's trying to zero in on. Played for Eric Patrick Mulsman at USC this past year, a freshman. 6'4", another 2-3 combo that can knock down the threes, 43%, 14 points per game. So there's other guys out there that you could look at and potentially zero in on. I'm interested to see, is the book really fully closed on Lamar Wilkerson in Arkansas, or closed because it's just a matter of time. He's really heading to Indiana and it just hadn't gone public yet. That's a possibility. I don't have a ton of source information on that other than someone that's a good one that has NBA connections, that talks to a lot of college coaches, is getting this feel that he may take visits and he doesn't think that those are just formalities and that Indiana is really going to end up with him. He's not sure about that. He's heard the same things that we all have. He's not discounting it that it's not going to happen, but he's not sold on it. So that may be something there. Right, 33 minutes in, I'm going to wrap it up. We really didn't go through the portal and talk about, well, who would you grab now with Keyshawn Hall off the board and Bashir, guys that Arkansas was, either zooming with or setting them up. And they zoom with Riley, Jerome Riley IV out of San Francisco. And those guys are all off the board. So, Diabate, I mentioned him, would be a guy there. So there might be some portal guys. I've got a few names that I'm going to start pouring through. I didn't want to wait to come on today because I need to get to some other stuff. So the next time I come on, it'll be something else to talk about, is maybe what else could you do to help supplement there. I haven't even mentioned Kareem Artal, 6'8", 6'9", 20-year-old overseas guy, and partly because I really see him and a guy like Isaiah Seeley, if you're expanding to 11 or 12, as those back-end guys that are somewhere between the walk-on value you got from the other folks and to having some kind of potential impact in dire straits. You need a body out there 5-10 minutes. You might need more than that if you have too many injuries or if you have an illness breakout or whatever. But they're guys that could actually maybe help you sustain, and get through a situation. Similar to what Jordan Burks did for Calipari on his front line his last season at Kentucky early in the year. A guy that didn't have a big role moving forward when they got everybody back. So I'm not really counting Artal as a top tier rotation piece. And who knows, maybe it could work out that way. But in theory, he's a guy at least at that, that small ball four, as a four. He's not going to stretch the floor a whole lot. He took, I think, in the Lithuanian league last year, think he took like 1.2 threes per game and hitting them at 31%. But he can handle a little bit. He's not stiff. So he can bring some elements, but how much of a role, really, I don't know. So I wouldn't say, well, Arkansas feels good about Thiero moving on because of that. No, they already had this guy in the fold, and they were making a hard pitch to keep Thiero. So I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying, if it's Nate Mint plus more role for Brazil, plus this other guy as a backup emergency at that forward spot, maybe Arkansas feels like they got enough to address other things, and maybe a wing shooter, not a Nate Mint that's a 3-4 small ball. And then the other thing before I leave here, I think Carter Knox is lined up to be an all SEC kind of guy. I wouldn't rule out Billy Richmond as some level of that either, all defensive team or something. Carter Knox potentially, I think the sky's the limit there. First, second, or third team, depending upon what he continues to do and what he means for the team. I think Darius Acup Jr. very well could be a guy like that if things go as what he has shown. I mean, this guy led a Team USA for his age group, 18 and under last summer, to a gold medal in the AmeriCup in FIBA and was the MVP. Scored big, assisted, made all the right plays. He's been a great player at IMG Academy and a clutch player. He did some really good things in the McDonald's All-American game, enough for me I had him in my top 5. I guess I'm either a homer or blind or not, but I thought he did a lot of really good things despite not shooting well from 3. So he's a guy that may have all league value. We can't rule out a Malik Thomas for that. Hell, if Trevor Brazil plays consistently like he did for the last 9 or so games of the season, you can't rule out him being somewhere with a possibility there. So it's not like Arkansas they still got plenty of retention options. Now we've got our eyes on DJ Wagner, as I truly do sign off here in a sec. And that's kind of a big one too. I mean, you'd like to keep him. But if he's off the board, some of these names we've been talking about for a while, I didn't talk about Jerron Pierre Jr. today, but he's another guy that if Kentucky's zeroing in on Wesley Yates III, maybe he's not as much of a priority as some of their fans thought he would be. Burks was a Swiss Army knife. Yeah, and you'd like having guys like that. You like that. All right, I am saying bye-bye, 37 minutes in. This isn't one of my longest. I'm proud of myself for that. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. The headline, Adu Thiero off to the NBA. It's maybe Arkansas is okay with what in their retention and other guys that we know they're on and still in the running for, where this works out and you don't have to necessarily have a guy that's Adu Thiero. It doesn't mean they won't identify somebody else, though, another big wing, whether they get an 8 native in or not, and still try to figure that out, or maybe just add another frontline piece somewhere for depth there that could play the 4 and may not bring all the qualities that Thiero did, but there's some other stuff they do. Thanks for being here again. Kevin McPherson, HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We'll jump right back in if there's something breaking with a commitment. We're on commitment watch. Last disclaimer that Calipari likes to have them on campus before he lets them publicly commit. Has anyone so far done that before this dead period that ends in 2 days? And then Arkansas, the last part of the headline, part 2 of it, I'm told we'll have as many as up to 4 visitors in the next 2 weeks. And that's going to be based on what needs are and what, that could be in flux and can change. And we'll come back and say that. Until next time, thanks for being here. We'll see you then.